I haven't talked that much about it, so you guys are getting a little bit of a scoop. But as time has wore on, I feel like it's more of a story that I can tell. So back in 2004, 2005, I had been introduced to Sven through a mutual friend. His son, Johan, was an aspiring sports psychologist. He's now a very successful sports agent. But I had met Sven, and we'd gotten along fairly well. And as we got to know each other, he had started to express interest in bringing me into the England setup in some way, shape, or form, which obviously would have been a really exciting thing to do. I mean, I've followed England and the league. And so in the run up to 2006, we were in contact with each other, and I would offer up various pieces of advice because I was trying my best to stay connected to things from afar here in California. And I don't know to what degree my input ever influenced the kinds of decisions or things that he was doing. You'd be very interested to see some of the letters that I wrote about. I mean, if you remember at the time, the captainship was challenging. The setup in midfield was also an issue. So there were all kinds of, it was a pretty meaty time. And as 2006 wore on, he said, all right, I'd like to bring you into the setup. It's a little bit complicated. And what I realized is that there were managers, some influential managers who shall go nameless, but you can figure out who they were not all that excited about bringing some bloke from the States into the setup to fuck with the players' minds. And so it was complicated for Sven. I was asked by him to whether I could make it over to Germany. As it turns out, I was already going because my family, we had planned a trip with a close friend of mine. So I said, okay, perfect. When you're there, I'll be in touch. We'll bring you in to the setup and we'll go from there. Okay, great. Went over there, watched the matches, had a fantastic time, but it was increasingly clear that it wasn't going to happen, or it was going to happen very late, or what have you. And we met at the Sweden match, and I started to give up on it. I didn't really understand what was happening behind the scenes. And then, as it turns out, my family went back. I stayed with my friend, stayed for another week, still nothing. I gave up on it. I was dropped off at the Frankfurt airport, going through security. Literally, my bag is going through the X-ray belt, and my phone rings. I pick it up on the other side of the X-ray belt, or I think I called the number back, and it was Johan, Sven's son. And he said, hey, Mark, where are you? I said, well, I'm about ready to get on a plane to go back home. And he said, we need you. Can you come to Baden-Baden? And I was like, come on, man. I was a little bit upset that it had dragged on like this. He was very convincing. And I managed at a time where it was not easy to get your bags back off of a plane and explain why you were, not going to take your flight to the States. Got all my shit, got picked up by my friend, my German buddy, drove 4 hours or whatever it is to Baden-Baden. And so it began, my brief but fascinating spell with Sven and the England setup. I got there. I met with Sven almost immediately there was like a garden bar, and I'll never forget the moment. We each, I think, had a beer in front of us, and I said, so how can I help? And he said, penalties. I said, okay. He goes, I need your help with penalties. Now this is, keep in mind, 36, 48 hours, maybe two days before the Portugal match. They had one training left before they went off to Gelsenkirchen, and I'm being asked to help with penalty kicks. And listen, there's a part of me that was like, oh, fantastic. I mean, I can be a hero here. I can come, I can take some pixie dust out of my pocket, come in, they'll be great at penalties, and I will be a national hero, and one of the great sports psychologists of all time. But what I said to him is, I said, listen, the last thing you want, and this is after a conversation, the last thing you want is at this point to bring me in to the fold, to try to do something. I go, there's just not enough time. I would not be fair if I said I was going to be able to make a difference in this period of time. I just can't. So, we spent quite a bit of time kind of navigating and negotiating how I could be helpful. And what we landed on was that I would kind of work behind the scenes, that I did help them design a penalty kick training session in in the training that I did go. You know, I came, got paraded in through all the security, watched a press conference, and was there for training. And as it turned out, the execution of the penalty kick training wasn't great. I wouldn't blame Sven for it. He wasn't the only one, maybe, that was, that was in charge of things. But afterward, we spent a good deal of time debriefing. We talked about a bunch of things. I gave him some advice. I gave him some advice on who should take the kicks. I'm not going to tell you the advice that I gave him, as much as you might want to know. The rest was even more surreal, because the team took off. I went and watched the match against Portugal in Gelsenkirchen. I drove there with his family, and I watched the debacle unfold of them losing in penalty kicks there, and missed out, because part of what Sven and I had agreed on was, hey, let's just get through this. That gives us a 4-day or what have you break. Then there's time maybe to introduce me in. I can meet with some of the players and I can see what I can do. And so, yeah, that went up in smoke. Very, very disappointing that I wasn't able to be more helpful